What's up, everybody? Dan Z here with another edition of Uncontrolled Narrative, and man, do I have some thoughts today. We've got the 2026 Winter Olympics going on right now in Italy, being broadcast by NBC, and of course, left-wing NBC is doing their best to control the narrative. We're not going to let that stand. We're going to take them to task, and we're going to do it right now. For those who don't know, and you might not know, because honestly, the mainstream media has basically ignored this story, and we'll talk about why here in a second. But before we get to that, let me just tell you, there is a skier on the Swedish women's team named Ellis Lindholm. Now, Lindholm is a female, was born female, and remains female, as everyone who is born female remains for the duration of their lives. But Lindholm doesn't want to be a female. Lindholm wants everyone to recognize him as a man. I know, the absurdity gets me too. This is a person who isn't even taking testosterone, hasn't had any surgeries because Lindholm can't. She wants to compete at the Olympics, and taking testosterone would qualify as a performance-enhancing drug, thus she would be ineligible to compete in the women's category. So this is literally just a person who cuts her hair short and wears men's clothes, whatever that means, and says, I want the world to call me a man. You need to use he, him pronouns. And a few outlets have run with this story like, oh my gosh, Ellis Lindholm is making history, the first openly transgender athlete to compete at the Winter Olympics. Whew! Breaking news, everybody. Woman competes against women at the Olympics. I know, first time ever. It's crazy stuff. But a lot of outlets actually have ignored this story, and there's a reason for it. The reason is because Lindholm wants to be known by he, him pronouns and wants to be called a man, which means that any outlet who covers this has to say he competes in women's skiing, or this is a man competing in women's events. And even the most left-wing, crazy writer, reporter, host, anchor out there knows how ridiculous that sounds. Now, they pretend to not, and they pretend that they're totally down with the cause, and, misgendering is wrong, and if she wants to be a man, I'm going to say it. But they also know that they depend on the audience. And the majority of the audience knows that when they read a sentence that says he competes in women's sports, that's going to raise up alarm bells and it's going to raise up red flags. So they don't want to do it. So they mostly have ignored this story because it would require them to say the quiet part out loud, because it forces them to grapple with the idea that it blows up their whole gender identity thing. And it would force them to ask Ellis Lindholm the obvious question. If you see yourself as a man, truly, and you want to be known as he, then why don't you compete against men? Now, we know the answer, but an honest media would ask Lindholm those questions. Now, the media knows it's not honest, but rather than outright lie or ignore it, they just don't do the story at all and pretend it doesn't exist. Well, NBC didn't exactly have that choice because they had to broadcast, as they have for all the Olympics, the event that Lindholm competed in. Now, they didn't actually show Lindholm in the American broadcast. I watched it because I was curious. How are they going to treat this? Are they actually going to play the game? Are they going to call this woman he as she is flying down the slopes? Are they going to say his time in the women's mogul event? But they didn't show it. I didn't see it. So I thought, okay, well, that kind of makes sense. We are talking about a Swedish skier, and this was an American broadcast. And to the NBC's credit, they mostly showed the American skiers and the skiers who did really well, which Lindholm was not one of them. That being said, if this was a transgender male to female, you can bet NBC's coverage would have been wall-to-wall covering it, but I digress. But they did show Lindholm on the international feed. And apparently, now I don't know this for sure because the feed is gone, the international broadcasters who do not work for NBC referred to Ellis Lindholm as she. I know. The horror. They called this woman she as she was competing in women's moguls. How awful. So what did NBC do? Well, what do you think they did? They apologized. The only reason I even know this happened is because I do look at the other side to see what they're saying. And I saw a couple of these crazy left-wing LGBTQ plus websites running with this headline, NBC misgenders transgender skier. And I thought, that's interesting because I don't remember seeing that. I watched the moguls. I didn't even see Lindholm. So what are they talking about? So I read the stories and I see what they're talking about. And in there, I see an apology from NBC, purportedly from NBC. So I reach out to NBC and I say, look, I'd like to know, did this happen? Did your commentator refer to Ellis Lindholm as she and her? And did you apologize for it? Here's what an NBC spokesperson told OutKick. NBC Sports takes this matter seriously. We streamed an international feed with non-NBC Universal commentators who misgendered Olympian Ellis Lindholm. We apologize to Ellis and our viewers, and we have removed the replay of that feed. Wow. NBC apologizes for the egregious sin of calling a woman she during a women's event at the Olympics. I mean, sometimes in life, you just have to laugh because you think, I'd love to be a satirist, right? Be someone who writes satirical posts for like the Babylon Bee. But honestly, do we even need things like the Babylon Bee anymore? And nothing against the Babylon Bee, which I love, but it's like real life is becoming parody. I mean, I put a tweet out there about this, and I honestly cannot believe that this is a sentence I typed. NBC apologized after a woman's mogul feed referred to female skier Ellis Lindholm as she. They called it misgendering. How is it misgendering someone to refer to them by what they are? Lindholm is a woman competing in women's skiing. You don't get to just say, I'm a man and you must call me he because I said so. It's not the way it works. I'm sorry. I know this is the crazy world that they want us to live in, where we just pretend that reality doesn't exist, where we just act like this woman is a man because that's the kind thing to do. It's not kindness. We are playing into a delusion, something that is not real, a fantasy. NBC apologizing is, to me, the most absurd part of this for a few reasons. Number one, if someone emails you and says, I'm a reporter and I want to know why you referred to a woman as she, my response would be, because she's a woman, now piss off. But even if NBC wanted to play the more PC game, but still stay out of it, they would have just ignored it. Because honestly, who cares? It's not even an email worth responding to. Someone comes to me, which by the way, people do come to me and say, you're a jerk, you misgendered so-and-so. And it's like, no, I didn't. You're misgendering them by pretending they're something they're not. If anyone's misgendering, it's the people calling Lindholm a man when she is a woman. Now, I didn't want to do this because I don't like to punch down, but I do have to talk about an article from Outsports, a radical left-wing pro-LGBTQ plus IA indigenous website, because it was their story that first got the attention of NBC and made NBC compelled to apologize. And I want to read one sentence from the article because honestly, I don't know how people can write these things and still take themselves seriously. This isn't about politics. This is about common respect and journalism 101. This is about getting a fact right. This was a person arguing that NBC should have said he, referring to the women's skier. And with a straight face, I assume, unless they're all playing us and this is just some crazy thing that was created where they're like, let's see if we can actually get people to start referring to men as women and women as men and we'll switch up the pronouns. I don't think so. I think they actually believe this stuff. Actually wrote the sentence, this is about journalism 101 and getting facts right. How is it a fact that Ellis Lindholm is a man? What factual basis is there for that statement? I mean, a fact is usually something rooted in evidence. Here's the evidence that we have. Ellis Lindholm says, I am a man. That is in the category for reasons why Ellis Lindholm is a man. She says it. Here's what's in the category for Ellis Lindholm is a woman. Ellis Lindholm is a woman. She has XX chromosomes. She has female reproductive organs? I don't know. Seems pretty cut and dry to me that the fact of the matter is that Ellis Lindholm is a woman. And yet we have outlets like this trying to gaslight us and tell us that the basic fact is that this is a man. And this all goes back to NBC and the major media outlets that continue to play along with this game because they so badly want to take us down this path of a false reality. They want to control this narrative and pretend that this world that they've created is the one that we actually live in. The one where we ignore what we can see, what we can hear, what we actually observe in the world. Simple things like Ellis Lindholm is a woman. And we're not going to let them control that narrative because it's not true. And I'm not going to pretend that something is true as an act of kindness. That's not kindness. It's the exact opposite.